Hello students, how are you? Hope you are all doing good. Chalo, okay. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss about atomic models, particularly Bohr's atomic model. Okay. So before we discuss Bohr's atomic model, first we will start with the first ever atomic model. Then we will come back to the Bohr's atomic model. So first we will discuss the models proposed by other scientists before Bohr. Okay, so what is an atom first? An atom is the smallest particle of a chemical element which possesses the chemical properties of it. And first ever atomic model was proposed by J.J. Thomson. J.J. Thomson is the first man who proposed atomic model. And according to Thomson atomic model, he said that an atom is like a positively charged lumps of matter with electrons embedded in them, like raisins in the fruit cake. Okay, so atoms are positively charged lumps of matter with electrons embedded in them, like raisins in fruit cake. This is why this model is also called as plum pudding model. Just like watermelon, the seeds of the watermelon are like electrons, and the remaining red part is like positively charged matter. Okay, so how does it look like according to Thomson? If this is an atom and these are all the positively charged matters and electrons are embedded in it. These are electrons and this are positively charged matter. He was the one who discovered electron. He was the one, Thomson discovered electron. This is very important. But he failed to explain his results, experimental results. And later on, Rutherford came into picture. Actually, this Thomson model was proposed in 1898. And 13 years after Thomson's model, that is plum pudding model, Rutherford came into picture and proposed another atomic model. And his atomic model was based on the experiment done by him with the alpha particles scattered by gold foil. Okay, now we will discuss Rutherford atomic model and how we could propose that model based on the experiment done by him with the alpha particle scattering by gold foil. Rutherford atomic model. This came in 1911. Okay. So he did one experiment with the alpha particles. He had taken one source of alpha particles like polonium radioactive element, so through which alpha particles are coming out of it. So this is a smallest slit, like a small hole through which alpha particle beam is coming out, and he had allowed that beam to pass through a gold foil. And what he could observe was most of the alpha particles were passed through the gold foil. And 1 out of 8,000 alpha particles, roughly 1 out of 8,000 alpha particles were scattered by this foil with greater than 90 degrees scattering angle, and very few alpha particles were actually scattered in the backward direction. Most of the alpha particles passed through foil. That is first observation. And the second one, 1 out of 8,000 alpha particles roughly were scattered by greater than 90 degrees of scattering angle. And the third point he could observe was, with that alpha particle scattering experiment, very few alpha particles were scattered in backward direction. Which means scattering angle is with 180 degrees. And after observing these results, actually he observed these results with the help of a zinc sulfide screen, which is movable screen, and these alpha particles were actually collected by it in the different directions after scattering. Zinc sulfide screen. This screen was collecting the alpha particles scattered by this gold foil at different scattering angles, which is a movable screen. Okay, and according to his observations, he had proposed the atomic model. Right, now we will see what are the postulates of Rutherford's atomic model, and they were based on these results. Okay. The first postulate he had proposed is every atom consists of nucleus at its center. He was the one who discovered nucleus. Rutherford discovered nucleus. So first postulate, every atom consists of nucleus at its center. And regarding nucleus also he had said some things. In nucleus, most of the, you can say not most, all the positive charge is in nucleus. All the positive charge is in nucleus. And there is no place for electrons in nucleus. All the positive charge is in nucleus and no place for electrons in nucleus. And most of the mass of atom is actually in nucleus. Which means the mass of the nucleus and is more than the electron mass. And in fact, if the mass of the atom is compared with the mass of the nucleus and electrons, if we compare the dimensions of nucleus and electrons together with overall size of atom, it is very, very negligible. So atom size is bigger than the dimension of nucleus and electron, which means, and most of the mass of the atom is accumulated at nucleus, which means most of the atom is an empty space. Most of the atom is an empty space. Is an empty space. Because most of the mass of the atom is at center. Okay? And there is no place for electrons inside the nucleus. Then where do they reside? The electrons were actually revolving around this nucleus at some distance away. Electrons revolve around nucleus at some distance away. There is no place for electrons inside the nucleus. And the next postulate he had proposed was because of this electron distribution, it must give the stability to the atom, and hence electron cannot stay at rest. They must revolve around the nucleus, and this revolution he had compared with the dynamic planetary model, where the nucleus is playing the role of sun and electrons are corresponding to the planets of the solar system. Right? So to give stability to atom, electrons revolve around nucleus in closed orbits. just like planets revolving around sun. Okay, and this, because of this circular motion of electrons around this nucleus, the centrifugal force is actually acting on the electron outwards to balance the force of electrostatic force between electron and nucleus. The centrifugal force, which is outwards, balance the electrostatic attraction force. Electrostatic attraction force between nucleus and electron, because nucleus is a positively charged matter and electrons are negatively charged particles, and they do attract each other, and that electrostatic attraction force is actually balanced by the centrifugal force, so that they are revolving around the nucleus in a closed orbit, just like the planets revolving around sun in the solar system. Right? And these postulates were actually from the alpha particle scattering by the gold foil, I said. How do we explain this? For example, the first postulate was saying most of the atom is an empty space. This idea came because the most of the alpha particles were passing through the gold foil without scattering because of the empty space. Nothing is stopping those alpha particles, because gold foil contains some number of atoms, and when alpha particles are trying to pass through it, because of the existence of empty space, mostly empty space in the atom of that gold foil, most of the alpha particles were actually passed through it. And what is the reason for this 1 out of 8,000 particles scattered with 90 degrees, greater than 90 degrees? And what is the reason for some alpha particles, very few alpha particles scattered in the backward direction with 180 degree scattering angle? The reason is the nucleus at the center of the atom. When the alpha particles are trying to have the head-on collision with the nucleus, alpha particle is a positively charged particle with 2 protons, and nucleus is a positively charged matter, and because of this repulsion force between alpha particle and nucleus, and when alpha particle is trying to pass through the atom, if it is trying to have head-on collision with the nucleus, then because of this repulsion force between alpha particle and nucleus, some alpha particles were scattered by greater than 90 degrees. And when few alpha particles had a head-on collision with the nucleus, then they were travelled back with 180 degree scattering angle. Very few alpha particles were scattered in the backward direction. And the main reason for this scattering of alpha particles is nucleus at its center. That is why the first postulate of Rutherford is there is some positively charged matter which is nucleus at the center of atom, and most of the atom is an empty space. This idea was actually came from alpha particle scattering by gold foil. And the problem with this Rutherford atomic model was, according to the classical theory or electromagnetic wave theory, if electrons are revolving around this nucleus in closed orbits, then they should radiate some energy because of this revolution, and electron should lose its energy because of this radiation, and electron should fall inside the nucleus immediately. The electron should radiate energy while revolving, and it should lose its energy, and it should collapse inside the nucleus. But in reality, it is not happening. We could see atoms. There is the existence of atom in which nucleus is there and electrons are actually revolving. But if it is revolving, it should radiate energy and it should collapse inside the nucleus. That is according to electromagnetic wave theory, the classical physics. This was not explained by Rutherford. And this problem, this paradox, was solved by Niels Bohr. Now we will see how Niels Bohr overcome this problem. And see the postulates of Niels Bohr to overcome this problem faced by Rutherford, which he could not explain. Okay? And remember, Niels Bohr was actually the student of Rutherford. He worked under Rutherford for a while, 1 or 2 years. Okay? So in 1913, 2 years after Rutherford atomic model, Niels Bohr proposed another atomic model which could explain successfully the failure of Rutherford atomic model. And that is what our topic for today. Niels Bohr atomic model. This model is proposed by Niels Bohr in 1913. And Bohr's atomic model is the postulates. The first postulate of Bohr is, actually he had assumed the model proposed by Rutherford as it is, like a nucleus is at center of atom, which was told by Rutherford. He had assumed as it is, and he had also assumed that electrons revolve around nucleus in closed orbits. These two were actually proposed by whom? Rutherford. He had assumed those two postulates as it is, but in addition to that, he had proposed something new which could solve the problem of collapsing the electron into the nucleus. Failed by classical theory, and quantum mechanically he could explain that. Quantum mechanically. Right, now we will see what is his postulate which solved the problems faced by Rutherford. And his postulate is, electrons do not revolve around the nucleus in all possible orbits. Electrons do not revolve around the nucleus in all possible orbits. in all possible orbits. Then in which orbits they revolve? They do revolve only in permissible orbits. This restriction is actually related to quantum, permissible orbits. And what kind of these orbits are called as orbits are not radiating energy and they are called stationary orbits. Okay, so electrons do not revolve around the nucleus in all possible orbits, but they do revolve only in permissible orbits, and those orbits do not radiate energy and they are called as stationary orbits. And the electron revolving in those orbits, you can say angular momentum. The next postulate I can say angular momentum of electron revolving in those stationary orbits is integral multiple of h by 2 pi, which means L equal to mvr equal to nh by 2 pi, where L is the angular momentum of the electron, which is mvr, mass of the electron, m is the velocity of the electron moving in orbits, or is the radius of that orbit, the distance of the orbit from the nucleus. mvr is the angular momentum of the revolving electron, and it should be equal to nh by 2 pi, integral multiple of h by 2 pi, where n is a positive integer excluding 0, 1, 2, 3, so on, and this is principal quantum number, very important, principal quantum number. The introduction of new quantum number, that is principal quantum number, denoted with small n, which represents the orbit in the atom. Okay, so what we have seen, Bohr assumed the two postulates of Rutherford as it is, nucleus at the center of atom and electrons revolve around that nucleus in some closed orbits. But in addition to that, what is his proposal? Electrons do not revolve around the nucleus in all possible orbits, but they do revolve around the nucleus in permissible orbits, which are called as stationary orbits, non-radiating energy. And the electron angular momentum revolving in those orbits should be equal to integral multiple of h by 2 pi, mvr equal to nh by 2 pi, where n is a positive integer excluding 0, which represents the orbit number, and n is principal quantum number. Then if these electrons are not radiating energy in the stationary orbits, if they are revolving in these orbits, then when does the energy is radiated by the electron? This is the question. If the electron is revolving in these stationary orbits, which is it is not radiating, that is said by Bohr. Then when does the electron radiate energy? That is said in the third postulate of him. Actually fifth, but the first 2 points were actually by Rutherford itself. Okay, so the fifth postulate, the fifth one is electrons radiates energy, which means absorbed or released. Only when electron jumps from one orbit to the other orbit. Only when this happens, electron radiate energy. And electron will absorb energy from outside if it wants to go to the lower orbit to the higher orbit. Absorbed if electron jumps from lower orbit to higher orbit. And released energy if electron jumps from higher orbit to lower orbit. How much it absorbs and how much it releases when it jumps from one orbit to another orbit? That absorbed energy or released energy will be equivalent to the energy difference between those two orbits. The energy absorbed or released is equal to energy difference between those two orbits in which electron is jumping from one to another. And that absorbed energy or released energy is in the form of photon, the particle nature of light, which travels with velocity of light in vacuum or air. Okay, so energy is absorbed or released in the form of photon. In the form of photon. Absorbed or released in the form of photon. If photon energy is h nu, which was released or absorbed, then it will be equal to the difference between the two energies of those orbits. If En2 is the energy of N2 orbit and En1 is the energy of N1 orbit, and that energy difference is equal to the photon energy. And from here we can write that nu equal to En2 minus En1 by h. The frequency of that photon or frequency of that transition when electron jumps from one orbit to another orbit, En2 orbit and N1 orbit. This is h. What is this h? H is a Planck's constant. H is Planck's constant. How much it is? H equal to 6.626 into 10 to the power of minus 34 joule second, which is a Planck's constant. Right? Now we will see, with the help of these postulates, how he could calculate the radius of the orbit and energy of the electron revolving in those orbits and velocity of the electron revolving in those orbits. Now we will find out these three quantities: radius, velocity, and the total energy of the electron. Here we go. Calculation of radius of the orbit, calculation of radius of orbit, comma, velocity of electron, comma, energy of electron revolving in the orbit. Now we will calculate these. Okay, so for that, let me take one small picture which describes the electron revolution around the nucleus. If this is electron and this is nucleus, and remember, the charge of the nucleus is charge of the nucleus is equal to plus ZE, where Z represents atomic number. What is Z? Z is atomic number of that particular chemical element, and E is the electron charge. E is electron charge, and plus ZE is here and minus E is here, and this is R, the radius of the orbit, and it is revolving like this around this nucleus in a closed circular orbit. Charge of the nucleus is plus ZE and charge of the electron is minus E actually. Charge of the electron is what? Electron is minus E. Here it is only magnitude. You can say electron charge magnitude in this case, or proton charge you can say, plus ZE, charge of the nucleus is equal to plus ZE. Z is proton number or atomic number, and E is charge of magnitude of charge of electron, magnitude of charge of electron, which is equivalent to the charge of proton also, or proton. And electron charge is minus E. So negatively charged particle is revolving around a positively charged nucleus, and obviously according to Coulomb, electrostatic attraction force exists between nucleus and electron. How much? It will be 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE into minus E by R square. In general, it is F equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 by R square. The force acting between two charges Q1 Q2 separated by some distance R. Here the distance of separation is smaller and ZE is one charge like Q1 and minus E is another charge like Q2. So this is the force of attraction. Which side? Towards the nucleus. Okay, so to balance this force, actually this electrostatic force gives the centripetal force to the electron revolving in the circular orbit. Electrostatic force provides the centripetal force for the electron, and centrifugal force will act on this outwards to balance this force so that the atom will be stable. Okay? So to balance this force, centrifugal force acts on electron, which is equal to mv square by r, which should be equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE into E by R square. I am not taking minus E because the minus represents the attraction force, and I am equaling only the magnitudes of the forces. The centrifugal force acting on the electron is outwards, and electrostatic force acting on the electron is inwards. They are balanced such that the magnitudes of those forces are balanced in such a way that the atom is stable. So for giving stability, you can say for stability of atom, centrifugal force balances that electrostatic force. Right? Now using this expression, we can calculate the radius of the orbit. Okay, so from Bohr's one of the postulates, what we have seen from Bohr's postulates, mvr equal to nh by 2 pi. The angular momentum of the electron should be equal to integral multiple of h by 2 pi, and from here v equal to nh by 2 pi mr. And what is v square? N square h square by 4 pi square m square r square. Give this equation number 1, give this equation number 2, and substitute equation 2 in equation 1. Okay? If you substitute that, substitute equation 2 in 1. M by R into V square is N square H square by 4 pi square m square r square equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ze square by r square, ze into e, ze square by r square. Now we will cancel some terms and write the formula for small r. If you see, this will cancel with this, and this 4 will cancel with 4, and pi will be cancelled with the square of pi, and this m will be cancelled with the square of m. And is there any cancellation left? No. Now what we can write? Take this r onto the right side, so that r equal to n square h square epsilon naught by mz e square, pi mz e square. Pi is left here, only square is cancelled with pi, and m is left here, only square is cancelled with m. Pi mz e square. And since this is depending on the principal quantum number n, I am putting a subscript n here, because r, depending on the value of n, r will change, which means Rn is the radius of the nth circular orbit. Now if you observe this, h is a Planck's constant, epsilon naught is a permittivity, electric permittivity, and pi is constant, m is mass of electron which is constant, e is the electron charge or proton charge in magnitude. All are constants. If you substitute those values, you will get Rn as 0.53 n square by z in angstroms. You will get this. This is very, very important for the examination. 0.53 n square by z after substituting the remaining constants. This is E. Which means Rn is proportional to n square, which tells us that R1 is to R2 is to R3 is to so on, the ratio of radii of orbits will be equal to 1 is to 4 is to 9 is to so on, depending on the n value. And Rn is proportional to n square by z. This is very important. As n increases, the orbit number increased from inner to outer, and radius will increase automatically. So Rn is the orbit, nth orbit radius, nth circular orbit radius. You have to remember this formula or this. Okay, so this is done. We have calculated radius of the orbit. Now we will try to calculate velocity of electron. Velocity of electron. So with using equation 2, and let us give this as equation number 3, substitute this r value here. So substituting equation 3 in 2, what do we get? V square equal to n square h square by 4 pi square m square 1 by r square we want, which means I can say pi square m square z square e power 4 by n power 4 h power 4 epsilon naught square 1 by r square is this. Now is there any possibility for the cancellation? If you see, this pi square will cancel with this pi square, and h square will cancel with this 4 and we get 2, and m square will cancel with this 4 and we get 2, and what do we get finally? Is there anything left? M square will also get cancelled. M square will also get cancelled. Then what do we get? Z square e power 4 on the numerator and 4 n square h square epsilon naught square on the denominator, which means V equal to Z e square by 2nh epsilon naught. Since this is also depending on n, we put subscript n. Take this as equation number 4. What is this? This is the velocity of electron in nth orbit. Velocity of the electron in nth orbit. So this is done. Velocity of electron is calculated. Okay. So now we will calculate energy of the electron revolving in orbit. We can also make one important point here, that Vn is proportional to Z by n, because all are constants. E constant, epsilon naught constant, h constant. It's proportional to Z by n, just like Rn is proportional to n square by z. You have to remember these. Okay, so I will write this formula here, then calculate energy of the electron. Vn, what we have got? Vn as Ze square by 2nh epsilon naught. So second one that we have calculated, this one. Now we will calculate En, the total energy of the electron. Total energy of the electron. Total energy of electron in nth orbit, that is En. For that, we will have to calculate the potential energy of the electron, which is equal to U, which is nothing but this negative of work done in moving that electron from infinity to the r distance. You can see this picture. The electron is brought from infinity to this particular orbit for a distance of small r. So how much work is done? The negative of work done. In general, the potential energy at infinity is taken as 0, and here it is ur minus u infinity. U infinity will be 0, so ur we will get. The potential energy of this electron in this particular orbit we will get. So this is actually ur minus u infinity. But u infinity anyway 0. So I am writing just ur. Instead of ur I am just writing u. as the potential energy of the electron. And what is F here? The electrostatic attraction force between electron and positively charged nucleus, which is minus 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE, this minus E by R square, which is minus 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R square. Substitute this here. What do you get? Minus infinity to R, and we will get minus 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught here again, ZE square by R square dr. And minus minus will go plus, we will get infinity to R 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R square dr. And 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square is taken outside the integral, we will get 1 by R square dr. And what is the integration for 1 by R square? It will be U equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square 1 by minus 1 by R infinity to R, 1 by R square is minus 1 by R. Now after applying these limits, you will get 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R with a minus sign here. So what is the potential energy of the electron? Minus 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R, where R is the radius of that orbit, which depends on n, the orbit number. Okay. Now we will calculate kinetic energy. So let me write U here. U as minus 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R. This potential energy. Now we will write kinetic energy of the electron. Kinetic energy of electron in orbit, taking it as K, which is half mv square because it is moving with some velocity v in the circular orbit. And from equation number 1, from equation 1, mv square by r equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R square. And from here, if R cancels with this square, we get mv square as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R. And if I want half mv square, 1 by 8 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R, which is nothing but kinetic energy of the moving electron in the orbit, ZE square by R. This is the kinetic energy of the electron in the orbit, nth orbit, because R depends on n. Okay, so let me write K here. K is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, 8 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R. So this is K. Now you have potential energy and kinetic energy. Then it is easy to write the total energy of the electron. So total energy of the electron, En will be K plus U. What is K? 1 by 8 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R. And what is U? It is minus 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught ZE square by R. And if you simplify this, you will get minus 1 by 8 pi epsilon naught Z E square by R. Right? So this is total energy. Let me write it here. En is minus 1 by 8 pi epsilon naught Z E square by R. Now if you substitute R value from here in this equation, for example, then I don't know what is the equation number, but okay, En is here and Rn is here, and En can be written as minus 1 by 8 pi epsilon naught Z E square by R is n square h square epsilon naught into pi m Z E square in the numerator. Now is there anything to be cancelled? Pi will cancel with pi. Anything left? No. Okay. So what do you get? Minus m Z square e power 4 by 8 n square h square epsilon naught square. This is the energy of the electron in nth orbit. This. And this is proportional to Z square by n square. All are the others are constants. Z square by n square. Okay. So what happens if n increases here? If n value is increased, because of this negative sign, the energy of the electron will increase. If n increases, you can say if n increases, En increases. What does this mean? Higher orbits, electrons in higher orbits have more energy. If n increases, En will increase because of the negative sign. This is very, very important. And if you substitute all these constants, m value, e value, h and epsilon naught, you will get En equal to minus 13.6 Z square by n square electron volt. Minus 13.6 Z square by n square electron volt. So depending on the value of n and depending on the atomic number of that chemical element, the energy will change. But remember, the outer orbits are having more energy than the inner orbits, because as n increased, energy is increased. Okay, so if you observe this equation, this one and this and this, if you observe these three, you can find out one simple rule, like I will write here. E is equal to minus k. E is equal to minus k, and k is equal to minus u by 2 minus u by 2, u by 2 with a minus, you will get k equal to minus k and k equal to minus u by 2. This you have to remember, very important. And also these proportionalities, you can see if I write En here, instead of this, and also I am taking this out, the final formula for En will be En equal to minus mz square e power 4 8n square h square epsilon naught square is the final formula. And from these three formulas, we are also done with this, all are calculated. And from here Rn proportional to n square by z, and from here Vn proportional to z by n, and here En proportional to z square by n square. You have to remember these formulas as well as this proportional. Okay, so till now what did we discuss in this lecture? We started with the first ever atomic model proposed by Thomson, and then Rutherford atomic model based on his alpha particle scattering by Guldfoyle, and Bohr's atomic model and his postulates and his calculation of radius of the orbit, velocity of the electron in the orbit, and total energy of the electron in the orbit. And formulas are here, and these are very, very important for the entrance exam, and particularly these also, how they are depending on n value and z value. If n increases, what happens? If z increases, what happens? These kind of questions may be asked in the examinations, particularly entrance examination. Okay, hope you have understood. If you have any doubts regarding this lecture, you can post it under the comment section. Thank you.